Ceremony of the U.S. Social Forum. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman, and we are on the road in Detroit, the site of the U.S. Social Forum, where more than 10,000, 15,000 people have gathered from around this country and around the world for 4 days of workshops, meetings, marches to strengthen social movements in advance of progressive agenda. Democracy Now!'s Mike Burke was at Cobo Hall for the opening ceremony. He spoke with one of the national coordinators of the U.S. Social Forum, Adrienne Maree Brown.
And I am one of the national coordinators for the U.S. Social Forum. I'm on the board of Allied Media Projects and the Allied Media Conference, which just came to Detroit last weekend, and I'm the executive director of the Ruckus Society.
Can you tell us a little bit about the U.S. Social Forum? How is the Social Forum different from a typical conference? And also, why are you here in Detroit? Why?
Right. So the U.S. Social Forum is different from any other kind of conference. It's really a process, a movement-building process that's happening all throughout the year and that will continue happening. We have people's movement assemblies where folks are actually coming together to say what are the major issues that we care about and that we're working on, and what are the solutions that we're moving on those issues. And then we come together at the forum, both to do the workshops, but primarily to do these people's movement assemblies and to be in movement with each other. It's part of an international process. And so it's very groundbreaking for the U.S. to be a part of it and to say we're part of an international community trying to actually hold accountable our corporations and our governments, which are having an international impact, as well as having a local impact. And we're in Detroit because Detroit is the epicenter of that impact. So, I mean, you've been here a few days. I'm sure you've seen the abandoned buildings, the brownfields, the city that has been divested from because the auto industries and other corporations left like 30 years ago. So this city has been so hard hit by economic struggle, and yet throughout the cracks of the city, the most amazing solutions are actually growing. So urban gardens, urban agriculture, we have the highest number of urban gardens in the country. It's the fastest growing movement here. We have peace zones where people are mediating instead of calling the police in to take folks out of our community as a way of solving our problems. We have just all these innovative young people who are actually deciding to stay in Detroit and make it a beautiful place. And there's a lot of space, there's a lot of place here. And to me, I say that Detroit is what the rest of the world and what the rest of the country really has to look forward to. So it's very exciting to have 20,000 people here from all kinds of different movements to actually see what does the future of our movement need to actually look like.
I know you've moved to Detroit over the past year to help organize this conference. What has surprised you most about the city?
Well, first of all, I have to say I moved for love, and then the conference followed. But what has surprised me most is probably seeing how people are managing to get by and do powerful organizing without relying on foundation resources. You know, in a lot of other places, people go under or they don't pull out their programming because they don't get a grant or they don't get a certain kind of money. Here, the working assumption is folks are not getting that money, and so everything is done through relationships and connections and networks, and coalition work really means like we are going to come together and somehow make it happen. It's not perfect, and it's really hard, and it a lot of times means a lot harder work. But there's a sense of accomplishment in this city when we get things done that really comes from like we actually got our hands dirty and we did the work that I just haven't seen anywhere else, and I think that's to me the most surprising and interesting thing about being here.
And can you give us an overview of some of the topics that are being discussed at the Social Forum this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think a major one is the eco-justice movement, ecological justice movement. So basically, we're going to have a people's movement assembly where we're bringing together the climate movement, environmental movement, anyone who's sort of been working on the relationship between people and planet, to come together and say what are the major priority issues that we need to be uplifting right now, and what are the solutions that we see are really working that we want to highlight. And that's going to be happening on Friday. There's a series of actions that are also connected to that, leading up to a huge action on Saturday to shut down the incinerator in Detroit, which is putting out tons and tons of waste. It's the largest incinerator in the world, we've been told. We thought it was just the largest incinerator in the country. So we want to break some ground and really set a precedent of saying that even in a city that has as few resources as this, we are still going to find a way to be zero waste. We're still going to find a way to recycle. So that's one of the, I think the thing that's interesting for me is what moves through the workshops moves into the people's movement assemblies, moves into action, and goes into the streets. And just that throughway, that's like you can see an entire sort of movement process happen on several issues throughout the course of the week.
And can you also talk a little bit about what happened at Wayne State over this past weekend at the Allied Media Conference?
I was so geeked out. So Allied Media Conference, I think, is one of the most amazing gatherings of visionary media makers. And it's basically the idea is like everyone can be a media maker. We were teaching folks to make their own radios, make their own computers, and really be the people who tell the story and create the history of their own communities. And personally, I was really excited because I got to facilitate the Octavia Butler Symposium, and we got to really go in on why Octavia Butler's ideas, post-apocalyptic survival, and really thinking about how do we actually transform beyond anything we understand, how those ideas are really relevant to us now as organizers who are in the throes of change that we don't have any capacity to comprehend. It's easy to be devastated, and I think Octavia Butler's work calls us to be inspired instead. So we just really geeked out on that, and it was just an amazing, amazing gathering the whole weekend.
And I want to ask you a little bit more about Octavia Butler.
Okay.
But first, I want to play a clip. Amy actually interviewed her on the program shortly before she died.
Okay.
And this is part of what she said.
I'm going to read a verse or two, and keep in mind these were written early in the 90s, but I think they apply forever, actually. This first one, I have a character in the books who is, well, someone who is taking the country fascist and who manages to get elected president. And who, oddly enough, comes from Texas. And here is one of the things that my character is inspired to write about this sort of situation. She says, "Choose your leaders with wisdom and forethought. To be led by a coward is to be controlled by all that the coward fears. To be led by a fool is to be led by the opportunists who control the fool. To be led by a thief is to offer up your most precious treasures to be stolen. To be led by a liar is to ask to be lied to. To be led by a tyrant is to sell yourself and those you love into slavery."
Could you tell us more about Octavia Butler for those who haven't read her books?
Yeah, Octavia Butler was a black science fiction writer, female, one of the first of her kind, basically. I often say I don't even know she was human. I feel like she might have been a prophet alien who was sent here to guide us. And she did a lot of writing about kind of the society that we're in and trying to imagine, like, what are the different ways in which we are separating and creating division based on class differences, based on race differences, and then what are the ways we actually need to learn to survive. So growing our own food and really thinking outside the box in terms of what organizing looks like. One of her most famous series was Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, and it really tells a story of what does it look like in this country just a little bit later than this time for us to try to live without the resources that we've come accustomed to. And I think some of the things that are really key about her work is most of her protagonists are women of color. They are people who come from resources where they have few resources in their background, and then they're sort of pushed into these positions where they have to actually become leaders who can't create a huge following. They have to build their relationships one by one. And I think so many leaders in our movement today, they really want to think, how can we get things as big as possible? What's the massive size that we can accommodate? And we don't think about how do we actually build it still one to one and make sure people really deeply feel seated in their heart a desire for change. So I think Octavia's work is revolutionary, and I think it's inspirational. I think it's necessary. Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I wish everyone was here in Detroit right now. It's incredible. We just had a huge opening march. There are so many people here. I can't even believe how many people actually came. And I invite everyone to watch. So if you're not here, we're doing something called Detroit Expanded. So if you go to the website, ussf.org, ussf2010.org/DEX, then we're broadcasting 10 hours of programming every single day. And so folks can participate from wherever they are. I hope that you see the fruits of our labor here and that you are able to benefit from them in your own life and your own community.
Adrienne Maree Brown, National Coordinator of the U.S. Social Forum. And if you'd like to hear a full interview with Octavia Butler, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. At the opening march of the U.S. Social Forum here in Detroit, disability rights activists paid tribute to Justin Dart, a longtime advocate for the disabled. Dart died in 2002 and has been credited with helping to pass the Americans with Disabilities Act. Marchers made a giant puppet of Dart sitting in his wheelchair. Earlier in the week, Sharif Abdel-Quddus met up with 2 disability justice activists.
I'm Stacey Milburn. I'm with the National Youth Leadership Network.
And I'm Leah Lakshmi Piepshna Samarsinga.